Before you eat another normal snack, you may want to hear what it was doing before it reached your plate. Because behind breakfast cereal, soda, ketchup, bananas, and even gummy bears, history has left fingerprints that are sticky, violent, weirdly medical, and occasionally made of beaver glands. Today, we're exposing 33 normal foods with disturbing histories. Your kitchen is about to look a lot less innocent. 1. Kellogg's Corn Flakes sound like the most innocent breakfast imaginable. Dry little flakes in a bowl, aggressively beige, the food equivalent of a very strict school principal. But their origin story is wildly uncomfortable. Dr. John Harvey Kellogg ran the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan, where he promoted a lifestyle built around clean living, bland food, cold baths, and a very intense hatred of human desire. Kellogg believed rich, spicy, exciting foods stirred up sinful urges, so he pushed plain cereal as part of a moral food program designed to calm the body down. Basically, cornflakes were not born as a fun breakfast. They were born as edible boredom with a mission. Imagine waking up hungry and being handed a bowl of flakes by a man who thinks flavor is the first step towards social collapse. That is not breakfast. That is a lecture with milk. 2. Pineapples today are so normal that we throw them on pizza just to start fights online. But in 18th century England, a pineapple was not food. It was a golden tropical trophy, a spiky little crown that screamed, "I have money, ships, and absolutely no chill." Because they had to be imported or grown in expensive heated glass houses, pineapples could cost the modern equivalent of thousands of dollars. They were so absurdly valuable that people sometimes rented them for parties instead of eating them. Yes, rented fruit. You would carry this slowly rotting pineapple around a dinner gathering like a luxury handbag, hoping everyone noticed you were rich enough to stand near vitamin C. Some pineapples were passed from event to event until they were basically social status with mold. The fruit was not the dessert. The fruit was the flex. 3. Artificial vanilla already feels suspicious because anything labeled vanilla flavor is usually doing a lot of emotional hiding. But one old ingredient in the flavoring world takes that suspicion and drives it straight into nightmare territory: Castoreum. Castoreum comes from beavers, specifically from scent sacs, located very close to the place you are now desperately hoping I do not describe in more detail. Beavers use it to mark territory, which is already rude, and humans discovered it had warm, sweet, musky notes that could resemble vanilla, raspberry, or strawberry. To be fair, it was never as common as the internet sometimes claims, because harvesting beaver gland goo is not exactly an efficient business model. Still, the fact that it was approved and used at all means someone once tasted dessert and said, "Needs more beaver." Humanity, please explain yourself. 4. Fanta looks like a cheerful orange soda, the kind of drink that belongs at a birthday party next to balloons and questionable hot dogs. But its origin story comes from Nazi Germany during World War II, which is about as far from cheerful as soda history can possibly get. When wartime embargoes cut the German Coca-Cola branch off from the syrup needed to make Coke, local manager Max Keith had a problem: factories, workers, bottles, and no main product. So the company improvised using whatever leftovers were available, including apple fibers from cider production and whey from cheesemaking. The original Fanta was not the bright orange soda most people know today. It was a survival product made from scraps in a dictatorship, cut off from normal trade. So yes, one of the world's most playful sodas began as a corporate workaround inside one of history's darkest regimes. Fizzy but deeply cursed. 5. Figs are marketed as elegant, healthy, ancient, and sophisticated. Then you learn about fig wasps, and suddenly your classy snack feels like it needs a crime scene investigator. Many fig species have a bizarre relationship with tiny wasps. A female wasp crawls inside the fig to lay eggs, often losing her wings and antennae in the process, because apparently nature designed this like a horror escape room. In some figs, she dies inside, and enzymes break her body down so completely that you are not crunching on a visible insect. You are eating a fruit that quietly absorbed its pollination assistant. Now, not every fig in the grocery store contains a dead wasp, because many commercial varieties are self-pollinating. But the natural fig story still has that lovely detail where fruit reproduction involves a tiny wasp funeral. Suddenly, fig Newtons feel less like cookies and more like botanical taxidermy. 6. Coffee is the fuel of modern civilization, which is a polite way of saying society is mostly held together by hot bean water and panic. But in the Ottoman Empire, coffee was once treated like a dangerous social weapon. Coffee houses became places where men gathered, talked politics, shared rumors, argued, and possibly said things rulers did not enjoy hearing. That made coffee suspicious. Under Sultan Murad IV in the 17th century, coffee drinking was reportedly punished with terrifying brutality, and stories claim the Sultan even roamed the streets in disguise looking for rule breakers. Imagine ordering a cup of coffee and discovering the undercover customer beside you is not reviewing the foam. He is deciding whether your caffeine habit counts as treason. The fear was not really the drink, it was the conversation. Coffee gave people energy, opinions, and a room to share them. For rulers, that was the real nightmare blend. 7. Doritos feel like they were invented in a corporate laboratory by snack scientists wearing orange dust-proof goggles, but their origin is much more chaotic and much more beautiful. At Disneyland, a Mexican restaurant called Casa de Fritos had leftover tortillas that were getting stale. Instead of throwing them away, workers cut them into triangles, fried them, seasoned them, and sold them. Guests loved them, because of course they did. Humanity may disagree on religion, politics, and pineapple on pizza, but we all understand fried carbs. What began as a way to avoid wasting old tortillas eventually caught the attention of Frito-Lay, and Doritos became a national snack empire. So yes, one of America's most famous chips began as a restaurant salvage operation. The lesson is clear. Sometimes the distance between garbage and genius is a deep fryer, seasoning, and tourists with no self-control. 8. Honey is usually sold as pure, golden sweetness, like sunshine politely trapped in a jar. Then history kicks open the door with the legend of the mellified man, and suddenly honey feels less cozy. In old medical writings, there is a horrifying story about elderly volunteers who supposedly ate only honey until they died. After death, their bodies were placed in honey and left for decades, sometimes said to be a full century, until the corpse itself became a kind of medicinal candy. People would allegedly consume pieces as a cure for broken bones and other injuries. Historians debate whether this was real practice, rumor, or medical folklore passed through distant reports. But even as a legend, it tells us something deeply unsettling. Humans have always looked at food, medicine, and death and asked, can we combine these in the worst possible way? Honey in tea is lovely. Honey-preserved grandpa is not wellness. 9. 7-Up was not always just a lemon-lime soda for people who want carbonation without committing to cola. When it first appeared in the late 1920s, it had a name so long it sounded like a pharmaceutical receipt. Bib label lithiated lemon-lime soda. The important word there is lithiated. Early 7-Up contained lithium citrate, a compound related to lithium, which later became known as a psychiatric medication used for mood disorders. Back then, it was marketed as refreshing and uplifting, especially around hangovers and nervous exhaustion, because apparently the old beverage industry's solution to feeling rough was drink a fizzy chemical mystery. The lithium was removed in the 1940s, but the origin remains incredible. One of the world's most ordinary soft drinks began as a soda with mood-altering ambitions. Modern 7-Up says refreshing. Old 7-Up quietly said, let's chemically negotiate with your brain. 10. Artichokes are already weird vegetables. They look like armored flower grenades, and the edible part is basically hidden behind a medieval security system. But in 1930s New York, artichokes became the center of an actual underworld racket. Ciro Terranova, known as the Artichoke King, controlled much of the city's artichoke supply by intimidating farmers, distributors, and vendors. Prices were manipulated, competitors were threatened, and violence followed the vegetable trade like it was bootleg whiskey with leaves. Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia finally got so fed up that in 1935 he temporarily banned the sale of artichokes in New York City. Imagine being a normal shopper and hearing, "Sorry, madam, This vegetable has been suspended due to organized crime. The artichoke went from fancy appetizer to edible mob territory. It is hard to look sophisticated eating one after that. You are not dining. You are nibbling evidence. 11. Tomatoes are now so normal that they are practically the red wallpaper of food. Pizza, pasta, ketchup, salad, soup, salsa. The tomato is everywhere, minding everyone's business. But in Europe, tomatoes once had a terrifying reputation as poison apples. Part of the fear came from their membership in the nightshade family, which already sounds like a botanical villain club. Another problem may have been aristocratic tableware. Wealthy Europeans often ate from pewter plates that contained lead, and tomato juice is acidic enough to leach lead from such surfaces. So rich people ate tomatoes, got sick, and blamed the innocent fruit instead of their toxic dinnerware. The tomato did not murder them, their fancy plates did. Poorer people, using wooden plates, had less reason to panic. So one of the great food misunderstandings of history was basically caused by luxury cookware saying, "Congratulations, you are poisoned in style." 12. Pringles are strange before the history even begins. They are not shaped like normal chips, they come stacked like poker chips in a cardboard tower, and they have the confidence of a snack that knows exactly how loud it is. Their can was partly designed by food chemist Frederick Bauer, who wanted a container that would protect the chips from breaking. Fair enough. Useful invention. But Bauer loved that can so much that he reportedly asked to be buried in one. When he died, his family honored the request by placing part of his cremated ashes inside an original Pringles can before burial. That is either deeply touching or the most brand-loyal funeral in snack history. Most inventors want statues, plaques, or buildings named after them. Frederick Bauer looked at a potato crisp tube and thought, "That is my final vessel." Once you pop, apparently the existential journey does not stop. 13. Nutmeg is the cozy holiday spice that makes pies, eggnog, and winter drinks smell like someone hugged a bakery. But its history is not cozy at all. In the 17th century, nutmeg grew almost exclusively in the Banda Islands, and that made the spice insanely valuable to European empires. The Dutch East India Company wanted control, not competition. What followed was violent conquest, mass killing, enslavement, forced displacement, and a monopoly maintained through terror. People were not suffering because nutmeg was delicious in cookies. They were suffering because global trade turned a small island crop into a weapon of empire. That is the disturbing part. Something we now sprinkle casually into dessert was once valuable enough for merchants and soldiers to destroy entire communities. So when nutmeg appears in a cheerful holiday recipe, it carries a shadow much darker than its smell suggests. The spice cabinet has receipts, and they are ugly. 14. Popcorn and movie theaters feel inseparable today. Try imagining a cinema without popcorn, and your brain immediately creates a sad room full of silent, chewing regret. But early movie theaters wanted nothing to do with it. During the silent film era, theaters tried to look classy, almost like opera houses for moving pictures. Popcorn was seen as cheap street food. It was noisy, messy, and associated with vendors outside, not polished indoor entertainment. Theater owners hated the crunching, hated the smell, and really hated cleaning it up. Then the Great Depression arrived, and suddenly cheap snacks became very attractive. Popcorn cost little to make, customers loved it, and theaters discovered that selling inflated corn could save their business. The snack they once treated like edible trash became the financial hero of cinema. Hollywood may have stars, but popcorn paid rent. Crunchy little capitalist miracle. 15. Early canned food sounded like a miracle. Meals sealed in metal, ready for armies, sailors, and explorers. Unfortunately, early cans also came with a bonus ingredient no one ordered: lead. Many cans were sealed with lead solder, and over time that could contaminate the food inside. Arctic expeditions were especially vulnerable because they depended heavily on canned provisions while trapped in brutal conditions. The doomed Franklin expedition, which vanished in the 1840s while searching for the Northwest Passage, left behind evidence of starvation, disease, possible lead exposure, and cannibalism among the desperate survivors. Historians still debate how much lead contributed compared with cold, hunger, scurvy, and poor planning. But the image is horrifying either way. Men at the edge of the world, eating from cans that may have been quietly poisoning them. Convenience food began with a very harsh warning label: may contain soup, metal, and doom. 16. Graham crackers were not invented as a cheerful snack for children or as a structural support system for s'mores. They came from Reverend Sylvester Graham, a 19th-century health reformer with very strong opinions about diet, morality, and human urges. Graham believed that rich foods, meat, spices, alcohol, and pleasure in general were pushing society into moral disaster. His solution was a plain vegetarian diet built around coarse whole wheat flour. The cracker connected to his movement was meant to be simple, dull, and spiritually calming. In other words, the original energy behind graham crackers was not campfire dessert. It was, please stop enjoying yourself so much. Later companies sweetened and commercialized the idea, because humanity will always find a way to turn moral discipline into a cookie. Sylvester Graham wanted self-control. We added chocolate and marshmallows. History is beautiful that way. 17. Onions were not just dinner ingredients in ancient Egypt. They were symbols, offerings, medicine, and spiritual objects with layers of meaning, which is convenient because onions are literally made of layers. Egyptians associated their circular shape and concentric rings with eternity, renewal, and the structure of the universe. That is already more philosophical pressure than most vegetables can handle. Onions were placed in tombs, painted in religious scenes, and used during burial rituals. In the mummy of Ramesses IV, onions were reportedly found placed in the eye sockets, creating one of the strangest images in royal funeral history. Imagine being a pharaoh, ruler of Egypt, divine figure on earth, and your afterlife preparation includes onion eyes. It sounds absurd now, but to the Egyptians, the onion was powerful, protective, and eternal. To us, it is what makes us cry while cooking. To them, it was cosmic architecture with a smell. 18. Ketchup today is the friendly red sauce of fries, burgers, and people who refuse to eat anything without emotional support. But 19th-century ketchup could be genuinely disgusting and sometimes dangerous. Before strict food safety standards, commercial ketchup was often made from questionable tomatoes, spoiled scraps, and preservatives that belonged less in food and more in a villain's laboratory. Some producers used coal tar dyes to make old sauce look bright and fresh. Others relied on harsh chemical preservatives, including substances associated with embalming and industrial use. The goal was not quality. The goal was make this red liquid survive long enough to sell. Then Heinz changed the game by using ripe tomatoes, more vinegar, better processing, and a recipe that did not need the same terrifying chemical tricks. Modern ketchup became safe, stable, and popular. Before that, fries did not come with a condiment. They came with a red gamble. 19. Chewing Gum's American rise has one of the strangest guest stars imaginable. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, the Mexican general best known in the United States for the Alamo. After his political career went sideways, Santa Anna spent time in exile and brought chicle, a natural tree sap, to New York. He hoped it could be used as a cheap rubber substitute for things like carriage tires. That plan failed because chicle was not exactly the industrial miracle he wanted. But inventor Thomas Adams experimented with it and eventually turned it into chewing gum. So a military leader connected to one of the most dramatic conflicts in North American history accidentally helped launch a candy habit based on repeatedly chewing flavored tree sap. Santa Anna wanted rubber. America got gum. That is history's chaotic filing system at work. War, exile, failed manufacturing, then suddenly everyone is blowing bubbles at a baseball game. 20. Tea seems gentle. It sits in cups, calms grandmothers, and makes people say things like, just one more biscuit, with dignity. But Britain's obsession with tea helped fuel one of the ugliest trade systems in modern history. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Britain wanted enormous amounts of Chinese tea, but China did not want enough British goods in return. The trade imbalance frustrated British merchants, so they pushed opium into China on a massive scale, profiting from addiction and social devastation. When the Chinese government tried to stop the trade, Britain used military force in the Opium Wars. This is the dark side of a normal drink. Tea demand became tied to imperial violence, drug trafficking, and national humiliation for China. There is no cute joke that makes that less awful. The cozy cup had a brutal global supply chain behind it, and millions paid the price. 21. Fondue looks ancient, rustic, and wholesome, like Swiss villagers have been dipping bread into melted cheese since the mountains were invented. The reality is much more manufactured. While melted cheese dishes existed before, fondue as a national tradition was heavily promoted in the 20th century by Swiss cheese interests. In the 1930s and later, the Swiss Cheese Union pushed fondue as a symbol of Swiss identity and a convenient way to increase cheese consumption. That is right. The cozy pot of bubbling cheese was not just culture, it was marketing. A dairy campaign successfully convinced people that stabbing bread with tiny forks and drowning it in molten cheese was heritage. To be fair, this is one of the more delicious propaganda victories in history. Some nations build myths around warriors, kings, and revolutions. Switzerland looked at surplus cheese and said, "Gather around, citizens. Tradition is now liquid." 22. Gummy bears are adorable. They are tiny, colorful, squishy little bears that look like they should live in a candy forest and file cheerful tax returns. Then you learn why they chew like that. The classic gummy texture comes from gelatin, and gelatin is made by processing collagen from animal skin, bones, and connective tissues, often from pigs and cows. In simpler terms, that cute candy bounce comes from the parts of animals nobody puts on a birthday card. This does not mean gummy bears are unsafe or unusual. Gelatin is widely used in food, medicine capsules, and desserts. But it does mean the magical chewiness has a very unmagical origin story. Somewhere between the slaughterhouse and the candy aisle, bones and tendons became a smiling red bear. Food technology is impressive, yes? It is also sometimes a fairy tale written by a butcher. 23. Pepper is so ordinary now that it sits on tables beside salt like a tiny black afterthought. But in the ancient and medieval world, pepper was precious, exotic, and expensive enough to appear in serious political negotiations. When Alaric the Visigoth besieged Rome in the early 5th century, the ransom demanded from the city reportedly included gold, silver, silk, tunics, and 3,000 pounds of black pepper. Not 3 pounds. 3,000. Imagine being a Roman official trying to save the city and realizing your emergency shopping list includes an avalanche of seasoning. Pepper mattered because it came through long trade routes from India and beyond, making it a luxury commodity. Today, we casually grind it over eggs while half awake. Back then, it was valuable enough to be part of the price of not having Rome burned or looted. Your pepper shaker has seen empires panic. 24. Coca-Cola's early history is not just it had cocaine, although yes, that part tends to kick the door open. Its inventor, John Pemberton, was a Confederate veteran and pharmacist who had been wounded during the American Civil War and became addicted to morphine, like many injured veterans of that era. He developed coca-based tonics in a medical culture where patent medicines promised miracle cures with very little regulation and very much confidence. Coca-Cola emerged from that world. Part stimulant, part nerve tonic, part business gamble, and part, please trust this syrup with your problems. Early advertising leaned into health claims that would make modern regulators spit coffee across the room. The drink later changed dramatically, removing cocaine and becoming a global soft drink empire. But its roots are tangled in war injuries, addiction, and the Wild West of medical marketing. Before Coke was refreshment, it was hope in a glass with questionable chemistry. 25. Canned tuna did not start as a beloved pantry protein. A century ago, tuna was not the glamorous sushi star or gym meal staple it is now. In parts of the American market, it was considered low value, oily, too strong, or simply not the fish people wanted in a can. Sardines were the reliable canned seafood business. Then, in the early 20th century, Sardine shortages pushed canners to experiment with tuna. One major breakthrough came when albacore tuna was cooked and canned in a way that made the meat look pale and mild, earning comparisons to chicken. Marketing did the rest. The public had to be convinced that this trash fish was not trash at all. So canned tuna became a triumph of rebranding. Take an unpopular fish, steam it, lighten it, name it nicely, and sell it as respectable. The ocean did not change. The sales pitch did. 26. Bananas are cheap, cheerful, and suspiciously convenient. They come in their own wrapper, they're soft enough for babies, and they make smoothies feel like someone tried. But the modern banana trade has a very dark history. In Central America and the Caribbean, companies like United Fruit built enormous power around plantations, railroads, ports, and political influence. The term Banana Republic grew from places where foreign fruit companies had more practical power than local democratic institutions. To keep bananas cheap and profits high, companies supported corrupt governments, pressured politicians, and were linked to coups and violence, including the 1954 overthrow of Guatemala's elected government after land reform threatened United Fruit interests. Behind the friendly yellow fruit was a system of labor exploitation and imperial interference. Bananas became cheap not because history was efficient, but because powerful people made others pay the hidden cost. 27. Carrots were not always orange. For centuries, carrots came in purple, yellow, white, and other colors, which sounds like nature had a vegetable paint box before supermarkets made everything emotionally predictable. The orange carrot became especially prominent in the Netherlands during the early modern period. A popular story says Dutch growers promoted orange carrots to honor the House of Orange and William of Orange, turning root vegetables into political branding. The exact truth is more complicated, because orange carrot varieties existed earlier, and agriculture rarely has one single origin moment. But the association stuck, and Dutch cultivation helped popularize the orange carrot across Europe. So the carrot in your salad may be partly a product of breeding, fashion, politics, and patriotic color coordination. It is not just a vegetable, it is propaganda you can dip in hummus. Somewhere, a 17th-century farmer looked at a root and thought, needs more monarchy. 28. Victorian ice cream sounds charming at first. Street vendors, little cups, children with sticky faces, London doing its best impression of a postcard. Then you meet the penny lick, and the charm immediately coughs itself to death. Penny licks were tiny glass cups used by ice cream sellers. Customers paid a penny, licked the ice cream out of the glass, and returned it to the vendor. Then the same glass was used for the next customer, and the next, and the next. Washing? Sterilizing? Germ theory? Apparently those were optional side quests. These shared cups helped spread diseases such as tuberculosis because Victorian street food hygiene was often just confidence wearing a dirty apron. Eventually, penny licks were banned in many places, replaced by safer cones and disposable containers. So the ice cream cone was not only convenient, it was a public health upgrade from communal mouth glass. Delicious progress. 29. Croissants are treated as the sacred symbol of French breakfast sophistication, usually photographed beside coffee by people pretending they woke up like that. But the croissant's ancestry points strongly to Vienna, not Paris. Its older cousin, the Kipferl, was a crescent-shaped Austrian pastry that existed before the French croissant became famous. There is also a dramatic legend that Viennese bakers created crescent pastries after the defeat of the Ottoman siege, shaping them like the crescent symbol associated with the enemy. It is a great story, bakers saving civilization and then dunking victory into coffee. Historians are cautious because legends love adding pastry to warfare. What we can say is that the French croissant evolved later, especially after Viennese-style baking became fashionable in France. So the croissant is not simply French. It is a buttery immigrant with a contested war story and excellent public relations. 30. Grapefruit seems like a normal breakfast fruit, the kind recommended by people who wake up early and own matching containers. But grapefruit is actually a strange hybrid, likely born in the Caribbean from the natural crossing of sweet orange and pomelo. So already, It is botanical chaos wearing pink flesh. Then comes the genuinely disturbing part. Grapefruit can interfere with how your body processes many medications. Compounds in grapefruit can block enzymes in the intestine, especially one called CYP3A4, which normally helps break down certain drugs. When that enzyme is blocked, medication levels can rise much higher than expected. For some medicines, that can mean serious side effects or even dangerous overdoses from a normal dose. Imagine eating breakfast and accidentally turning your liver into a confused traffic controller. Grapefruit is healthy for many people, but with some prescriptions, it is not a fruit. It is a tiny citrus hacker. 31. Baking powder sounds like the least dramatic substance on Earth. It sits in a cupboard, helps cakes rise, and quietly expires while nobody looks. But in the late 19th century, baking powder became the center of a vicious business war. Rival companies fought over different formulas, especially cream of tartar, alum, and phosphate-based powders. The competition got ugly fast. Brands accused each other of poisoning the public, funded scary advertisements, influenced newspapers, pushed legislation, and used fake science or exaggerated medical claims to terrify customers. Some companies tried to paint rival powders as literal household danger hiding in biscuits. Imagine opening a newspaper and seeing baking powder treated like a national security threat. Behind every fluffy cake was corporate espionage, lobbying, and panic marketing. The kitchen shelf looked peaceful, but the industry behind it was throwing elbows. Apparently, even muffins require propaganda when the profit margin is high enough. 32. Tonic water tastes like someone dissolved a bitter tree into a bubble bath, and that is not far from the truth. Its key historical ingredient is quinine, derived from cinchona bark and used to prevent and treat malaria. For European imperial powers, malaria was a deadly obstacle in tropical regions. Quinine helped British soldiers, administrators, and settlers survive in places where mosquito-borne disease had previously limited colonial expansion. To make the bitter medicine easier to drink, it was mixed with water, sugar, and eventually gin, giving rise to the gin and tonic. But the disturbing part is what that medical advantage enabled. Quinine did not cause imperialism, but it helped make violent colonization in parts of Africa and Asia more sustainable for Europeans. So tonic water is not just a mixer. It is a fizzy reminder that medicine, empire, alcohol, and exploitation once shared the same glass. 33. Nutella feels like pure comfort. Chocolatey, sweet, smooth, and dangerously capable of turning a spoon into a personal problem. But it was born from shortage, not luxury. In Italy during and after World War II, cocoa was expensive and heavily restricted, while hazelnuts were abundant in the Piedmont region. Pastry maker Pietro Ferrero used hazelnuts to stretch limited cocoa into a sweet paste that ordinary people could afford. Early versions were firmer, closer to a sliceable block, before the spread evolved into the creamy product known worldwide today. The disturbing part is not that hazelnuts were used. That was clever. The disturbing part is the background: war, rationing, economic hardship, and a population trying to rebuild normal pleasures from scarcity. Nutella is basically dessert engineering under pressure. It tastes like childhood, but its origin story is more like, we do not have enough chocolate because the world has recently been on fire. So now the real question is, which everyday food has the most disgusting, criminal, or completely insane backstory that we did not include? Drop it in the comments, but don't be gentle. If your answer makes people regret opening their fridge, you win. And if this video ruined at least one snack for you, hit like, subscribe, and let's keep turning normal history into evidence.